The lesson.
Oh, yeah.
All right, here we go. We've got the man Kyel Golly, aka No1Network. How are you, bro?
Yeah, good brother. Just for having us.
Now, you're here because you're on tour. You got the Nerve tour going on.
Nerve tour, yeah. Tall Poppy season. Yeah.
And you've done, I think you did the Brizzy show. Was that last week?
Yeah, last Saturday.
And then you've got
home first.
And you've got Adelaide tomorrow, and then Perth
Saturday.
Yeah. Now, first off, how was the Brizzy gig? Because I seen some stuff online on your IG, and it looked pretty intense.
It was fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
Like usually we're doing home last, but doing home first actually felt fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like kick it off with a bang and kind of show people like the potential of what we could do at a show. Yeah, and usually it's like a celebratory thing, like home's like the finishing, like. But like this one was cool to kick it off with a big bang.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it looked nuts online, eh?
Yeah, it's been a big 18 months, like since obviously like Sober and the last album. Now we've linked up with so many new artists, and then outside of the Brisbane City area as well. You know, you got Knox over at Ipswich, Forest Lake, and then you got the ECB boys in northern New South Wales. And then we've been working with Stay True God as well, Stay True God in Deception Bay. So like you had a whole bunch of areas coming together, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I've seen clips where Knox was on stage. He was saying something about someone passed away or something like that, and then it just kicked straight in, and it's off it went.
Yeah, homage to one of his boys. Yeah.
Now, we had Nerve in here, I reckon, a couple years ago. Yeah, and you actually were in the studio when we shot that interview. And you know, a lot's happened since that time, and obviously there was a fair build up before that as well. So No1Network. First of all, I mean that's like your thing, but that's a collaborative crew.
No1Network is definitely dependent on the network that we have in it. I think it changes every time someone adds to it, and it wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for all the people in it. And I kind of just help facilitate and liaison like the networking between all of us, and kind of just act as like a middleman a lot of the time to bring it all together. Like anyone doing cool shit, anyone that really is trying to make a move, and hopefully we can kind of help them in whatever way we can.
Yeah. So how many people do you have on board as part of No1Network, and what roles do they play?
It's never anything official because obviously things change all the time. It's kind of, we've done, I think, about over 100 plus collaborations officially. So that's artists contributing to the No1Network and what it means and what it represents. But probably at the moment, probably got a roster of at least 50 plus artists that we can kind of hit up to do something, from rappers, videographers, graphics designers, photographers, stylists, like pretty much everything from the ground up that you see is someone that was young, kind of trying to get themselves out there in the creative field, and we've all come together, and we also try to bridge that gap between underground culture, but also like doing it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks mad pro. Everything that you guys are doing looks spot on, eh?
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I think we try to have that image and try to show that you can do it like that, but it's still all out of our own pockets, still very ground level.
Grassroots.
Yeah, we're all still living in share houses, like still just trying to get by.
No one's balling out yet.
No, like, literally, yeah. But I think that's an important part of the image, and what we're trying to do is not focus on the negative side of it, the positive side, and the lifestyle that we live is kind of a big justification for what we do. You know, being able to do what you want and create and do awesome shit with your friends. Yeah.
So then therefore, so No1Network is like a collective of people, but you're kind of like the main person that gets people on board. And
so for a few years, I was doing the music thing with Toby, Nerve, and working with a bunch of different artists. I kind of grew up around a lot of graffiti culture and photographers, and used to just explore in general, and kind of always like going out of my bubble and documenting. That was kind of my thing as a photographer, just documenting anything cool happening. And part of that was meeting Toby. He hit me up to do a gig, and when he was Syntax Junkies those days. That's how we met. We were about 19. So it's been about a 6-year journey now. And, you know, before that, had a lot of resources to kind of help contribute to that image of the music. Obviously, like, it's not just the music, it's, you know, you need graphics designers, you know, you need to represent the hip hop culture, and like, you know, it kind of helps facilitate that element. And had a lot of people growing up where I was like, hey, check out this music stuff. Would you like to get involved? Like, and to help kind of build on, I guess, the hip hop culture in general, because it's not just about the rappers, it's the people who listen to that music as well.
Yeah, well, the audience.
And it was a big thing in Brisbane as well. Everyone kind of was like, Brisbane sucks. There's nothing cool happening, you know. No one does anything sick. And it was kind of like a mission for me to kind of show that we can do cool shit. And when everything was popping off, I made a book called No.ONE. And it was kind of like 5 years of everything I documented. And I went away on a trip for 3 months to Europe. And over there I met a lot of people, got pretty inspired. A lot of young people just backing themselves and taking it seriously. And at that point, you know, I knew there was something there. I had a Facebook album called The Network, which is where I used to put all the photos of all the cool shit we used to do. You know, from running gigs to cutting our own stickers to making the albums ourselves to building the studio to, you know, going out doing a bit of graph or whatever. And then, yeah, it was The Network. And then we kind of, pulled it all together and made it an actual platform and something that represented that body of people, you know, everything behind the music and everything that kind of made the culture what it was.
Yeah, okay. So then when you mentioned like you first sort of linked in with Nerve about 6 years ago, is it when you guys linked up together that's when the name No1Network became a thing?
No, we were running around for a few years, and that was, you know, it was at that stage after a few years of doing our thing and seeing, I guess, that special element that Nerve could kind of represent with his music, having this crew behind him that weren't just rappers, you know. I think that's a big element of what it was. It was, you know, a whole bunch of talented creatives from the hip hop culture that were all hanging out, getting behind the Syntax Junkies and the Nerve movement. And so when I went away and came back, I was like, there's something we can piece together here.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of made it an official kind of platform and a collective and something for us to kind of really rep, not just the music, but everything else behind it.
Before you met Nerve, you were obviously listening to hip hop and you were still interested in the scene, but you weren't really involved in it?
Yeah, I grew up pretty heavy on Aussie hip hop culture. You know, it was pretty big spin out. Like, I grew up listening to people like Greeley. And then here we were, 19, getting hit up to go on tour, to go meet up with them. I grew up with the Smash Brothers, like Fracture, Scotty Hines, Dime. Like, me and my mates from school used to always bump that shit. So then meeting Toby, it became a good bridge for that because obviously he started doing the grime rap and like boom bap heavy. And at that point we weren't No1Network either. Greeley reached out to us and said, do you want to come to Tassie? Got this cool guy, Wombat, you could work with. And that was awesome. I remember we were living in the house together and he showed me that one of our first Wombat tracks. And we're like, holy fuck, like we need to link that up. And they started getting Toby to help out with some audio engineering stuff. And then around the same time, Fracture reached out and was doing these grime, the 50/50 shows. And that was nothing like what we had in Brisbane. And being a Brisbane kid, you definitely see Melbourne as this like massive cultural city. So it was like pretty exciting, you know, that we could maybe go down there and perform with all these people that, you know, been listening to, growing up with. And yeah, I just had a conversation with Toby and I was like, let's fucking do it. Let's hit Tasmania first and then we'll go to Victoria and do Melbourne, link up with all these guys. And that was like just before No1Network.
Yeah, right. Okay, so when Greeley hit you up about the Wombat thing and when you were talking to Fracture and that about the 50/50 grime, you were already friends with Nerve at that point.
Yeah, we were living in a house together, yeah.
Okay, so then how did you and Nerve first meet?
I had a mutual mate. I used to have like a photography platform called 9 to 5. And it was kind of like an irony of like the 9 to 5 lifestyle, kind of a little counterculture platform. And I just used to be like, you know, going into drains and the rooftops and just general young delinquent culture. And yeah, he was doing the hip hop thing with the Syntax Junkies crew. And they needed a photographer for one of their gigs. And yeah, rocked up and it was just your classic Aussie hip hop kind of, you know, when it was still fizzling and like getting there. It was after the golden era and stuff. So I just rocked up and it was a small show and did my thing and met Toby and the Syntax boys and I'd been seeing their stuff on the internet too. So I was stoked to be able to kind of link it up. That was one of those elements that I hadn't really documented yet. And I'd done like nightlife jobs and stuff like that and fucking hated it. Like that kind of mainstream R.M. Williams boy shit. So it was like really cool to have this like crew who I thought were contributing a sound that I hadn't heard before. And then from there it kind of built. And I was living at a share house where we were doing a lot of the videos. So we were all running through, you know, like the big setups in the house, all the posters and all the shit, like a lot of those houses were mine. I went through like 7 houses in 7 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and I think like the 4th or 5th one was where I kind of reached out to Toby and was like, look, do you want to move in? Could be pretty fun. You know, we just met Skrub. Skrub was 16, so we had this one house where a lot of the Syntax boys would all link up, and then we would have Skrub on the couch sleeping, and yeah, we'd like do parties underneath the house. Because like Queenslanders, you have like a big bottom underneath.
Yeah.
Because they're all on stilts.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it was just fucking sick because it was like, obviously, my whole thing was wanting to document this culture, and then to have Toby and the boys in this almost headquarters for it all to be. So we'd put on, bring all the decks, PA systems, boys would rap, freestyle, I'd document it all. And yeah, we had things called mic nights that we would run, and yeah, it was pretty cool. And
Yeah, right.
kind of built from there. And Toby Nerve always backed my shit. So when he started stepping out into Nerve, after they did this massive fucking album for Syntax, which took like 3 or 4 years from when they were growing up together, he like started to look towards Nerve and doing things as a single artist. And yeah, so he always backed me and I always backed him, and it was cool. Like that house, when it all came together, was kind of the big stepping stone.
Yeah, no shit. So basically, Nerve was in a group called Syntax Junkies, and when he was in that group, they needed someone to film their shit, and that's how you first met them.
Kinda, I was almost like, I was like there to document photos at a gig, and then I kind of got involved and was like, can I come hang out at the studio? And then kind of started throwing in little ideas. Toby needed a one take done for him and his mate, Jolly Rotten. And that was when they were just Thought Junkies. So you had Syntax here and Thought Junkies, and they joined. And I came and did this one take in the studio. And they were like, yeah, we just need someone to hold the camera pretty much. And I did this weird little pan, going along all the records, and then the light, and then dropping down and going in and doing these weird shakes and shit. And that wasn't really what anyone asked for, but I kind of had a bit of fun with it. And we chucked it on Facebook and it popped off. And that kind of started a fire for running these crazy one takes that, instead of just standing in front of a wall. And that was a pretty common thing was, hey, Golly, can we just stand in front of a wall and do our rap thing? And I would be like, nah, we're going to fucking start in the basement, run up the stairs, and then you're going to go through this hallway. And yeah, so I think that was when I kind of was stepping out of just kind of doing the photos and the videos for them, but actually kind of contributing to, what we represented and the lifestyle and pitching that into the music, and kind of trying to do something different that people weren't doing at the time.
So you mentioned that not long after you met Nerve that you then met Skrub.
Yeah, so Skrub, he was a Syntax fan, and he reached out to the boys, and when he was 16, he came up. He might have even been 15 at the time. He came and spent a week with us, and he had lots of fun. And actually, that was, I think, the 3rd or 4th one take we did. We had a big warehouse that we were all hanging out in. It was like a shelter, and one of our friends ran it, and he said we could use it. So we did this ridiculous one take, starting on a staircase, coming down the stairs, going around, and then there's like a little band room. Same thing, just like kind of being a bit weird and extra with it. And yeah, that popped off as well. That was the one we had 360 share, and it got a couple 100,000. And again, it just kept the fire going with like just being a bit out there and fun with it. And after that week, Skrub was like, I want to come live up here.
Oh, and that's when he actually went and moved there.
And he had a brother up there, so he was able to come move up, stay with his brother, and transition into living in Brisbane.
Yeah, okay. And then, so is it after that the thing with Greeley and Wombat happened, or was that?
It was around the same time. Yeah, so we did. Skrub came up. We were all working together. Syntax album, and we started doing a bit of the Nerve grime stuff. We had mate Web Shells, and then we had the Skrub Skinned Alive tour, not tour, but Skinned Alive show in Brisbane. So that was kind of one of our first times, like putting out our own ground up show, printing the CDs, making our own CDs for Skrub, getting ready to pitch this album dropping, for this fucking young weapon. And that was when we did like him in the doctor suit downstairs at the house. That was the same house, with Nerve dead on the table. And then we did this, big show. And I think around then was when we were talking to Greeley and down south. And
yeah, okay.
And Toby was he was a massive audio engineer at the time, always has been. And he was doing little bits and pieces for the boys down there. And yeah, I think we did the Skrub show, and then the next month we went down.
Yeah, right. And then around what year? Just like 2016?
2016,
15?
yeah.
Like around...
Yeah, it was 2016 was when we were really pushing it as a crew.
Yeah, okay.
And doing all this wild stuff, and was no No1Network umbrella yet. It was just just everyone hanging out. Yeah. I was just the relentless video guy pushing the boys to do the weird shit.
And then, because the first time I caught on to Nerve was when he dropped, I think, Snot Rocket.
Yeah.
Now, was that around the same time?
Around the same time, yeah. I think that was before we went down too. So yeah, that was same period, same house. Nerve was going away to do a little farm trip. It was his first single that we were kind of trying to push. It was just back-to-back bars, just fucking relentless.
I remember the first time I seen and heard that, man. I played it a few times because I'd never heard of him before, and no one was talking about him at that point that I was around. And I reckon after the third time I heard it, I knew. I was like, "Oi, man, this dude." Because then I read the credits and he made his own beats.
Yeah. It was always something special about it.
Yeah,
Like
and then
yeah.
and then I noticed that he was just different, but he had that kind of like 90s boom bappy sort of swing. And I just knew, I was just like, "Oi, man, I reckon this dude is going to, have a big impact at some point if he keeps going." And now fast forward the clock.
Yeah, it was wild. I think he'd just done like a 21-track album for Syntax, mixed, mastered, engineered the whole thing, produced a large majority of it. And then in the space of a couple of weeks, he whipped up a grime album. And then we dropped that the week before we went down to go meet everyone down in Tassie and Melbourne.
Yeah, okay. So then that's around the time where I guess the Syntax Junkie stuff has sort of come to an end. And then Nerve has started going on his solo.
Yeah, it was one big super album, kind of, from when they first met to where we were getting to that point. And a lot of the boys also went off and focused on their own music. And, but yeah, it was a big mission, and it was a long time coming together. And I think they all needed to just do their own thing for a bit.
And then, so did you film Snot Rocket?
Yeah. That was really when I was still learning videos. I always told myself I'd never be a videographer, but we're doing all this one take stuff, and it was just convenient, I guess. I never really thought about focusing on the technical side of it. It was more about documenting the culture and contributing to something like a lifestyle kind of approach. And that was kind of one of the ones where I was trying to be a videographer. Looking back at it, it's pretty funny. It's just my photo camera on a tripod and trying to just choose little spots around the local area. We used to hang out West End. So it's a pretty down to earth area. Closest to where we used to live, and not that city vibe. And just pitched it all together. Yeah, no, it's
in my books, man. That's a classic.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones where it wasn't just the wild one take shit.
And then I reckon it was around, it would have been around 2016, 2017, when Chillin' and Wombat sort of started to pop off.
So I think 2017, around the same time we had the Night Shift album. So Nerve and Wombat were the first duo that I remember. So around then we were doing our thing, linked up with Wombat, and then Body Bag Media came up. And that was when you started seeing Husky, Snow, and Chill.
Yeah,
and that was before you kind of had the Wombat and Chill duo.
Because through Greeley, that's when yourself, Nerve, have gone over and met Wombat for the first time.
Yeah.
And then, so what is it that you guys worked on when you went over there?
Fuck, we did both those trips. We did 5 videos each week. Also, shout out to Retainer, because we did that in the same week. I just sent Retainer a message. It was like, "Hey man, we're in Melbourne doing this grime stuff. Would you be keen to link up?" But yeah, the week we did in Tassie, we stayed for a week with Greeley and Kingston, just crashing on the couch. And it was pretty wild, put us up pretty hard and just took us around, and within a few days we kind of met a lot of the scene down there. We did the THC Cypher video, another one take, just running from the backyard through the house. That was massive. We did a bunch of the Nerve and Wombat tracks. So those boys recorded in the Kingston houses and in the bloody just in the bedroom. What do you call it? The wardrobe.
Yeah. The home studio.
Yeah. We're just in a little wardrobe. Recorded a lot of tracks there, and then just busted out a bunch of clips. Yeah, I think we did about 4 clips down there.
Right.
That was when we had the IED. So they had made IED before we came down. So it was already straight away we had stuff to work on. And that was when we pulled a lot of people together. I tried to do this kind of movie cinematic style video, and you got them all moving around town with the big black van at the end that comes and picks Wombat up. And yeah, we did that. I did the Greeley, Dundee, and Nerve.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, fuck, it's been so many. I can't even remember the name of the track.
Nah, but I reckon I know the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, so that was you got the CCTV footage and hanging out in the backyard, and yeah, it was all real just bootleg, go get it. And yeah, we just had a bunch of stuff to work on there, and I feel like we did another Nerve and Wombat there. And then yeah, so we did Tassie, and then we flew up to Melbourne, and that was when we did the 50-50, and Wombat came up as well, and we were able to do a lot of the night shift stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we did the Game Over as well. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of the heaps of tracks that we did up there. Yeah.
Now in those early stages, because like Wombat now, you know, he's one of the biggest Oz rap acts, you know, at the moment. When you first met him and you first checked out his stuff, did you get that feeling like, yeah, this dude's got it and he's going to take off, or it was a bit more progressive?
No, 100%. I think at that time, you know, it was before the drill movement came in and this grime movement came in. And a lot of us have been listening to the UK scene and seeing what was happening over there. And obviously grime had this whole new element. You know, it was very focused on MC DJ, 140 BPM beats. And there was only, I think, 5 people in the country at the time that were really doing it. You had the Smash Bros, and the only young person I really knew that was killing it was Alex Jones. So when you listen to Wombat, you could just hear the way that he rapped it was like hearing some Alex Jones, you know, when the way he rides the beat and the understanding of not just double time rap, like it's understanding like that. And that was the thing with grime culture, is like finding your unique way on the beat and your unique infliction, and be able to ride that 140 BPM in a unique way. And Wombat had that. And if you'd been listening to UK grime at the time, you just knew straight away. And turning grime into like your own way as well was a big thing, not just like kind of copying the slang from over there, you know, like get gas like a servo, you know what I mean? The most unique, you know, like, and that's what it's all about, these little hype bars, these little repetitive moments, these that make the show shut down and everyone get gassed, you know. And that's, yeah, so there was a get trapped like a snake in the outback, like things like that, you know. And yeah, you can see the genius behind it, the brain behind it, but also how he controlled himself on a beat. And that's really important, because it's all about that live element, you know. DJ throws you any beat and you can just ride it. And yeah, Wombat's had that since day one. He's a weapon.
Yeah, he's a machine, man.
Yeah.
Like he's on another level with that shit. Yeah. And then, so was that trip that you guys did to Melbourne for that 50-50 grime night, is that the first time that Wombat met like Alex Jones? And
Wombat had already done a 50-50 before that.
Okay.
And he really backed it, and it was fucking awesome going there. Same thing, was kind of just like getting out of Brizzy, and was like, let's take advantage of it. So we reached out to a bunch of people. That's where we met a lot of different MCs who kind of became part of that wave. You know, you had Shadow was there, Hazard. We did that About That cypher. That was massive. And I think at that point there was only 9 MCs on there. And then by the time I did the fully gassed third cypher, I think we had 18. So you could really see how the grime culture had grown in the space of almost 2 years. From that first moment we went to Melbourne and kind of all linked up, and Fracture put together that cypher at About That store.
And then, so it's after that the body bag media thing has popped off, and then that's where you started to see Chillin' It. And
yeah, I don't think many of us knew Chill at that time. I think a lot of Aussie hip hop was pretty focused on Sydney for a long time, and a lot of us weren't from Sydney, and we were all linking up through that grime movement. 50-50 brought a lot of us together, and not all of those people were just grime MCs either. I think the first time I saw Chill was on Body Bag, but it definitely was like Husky and Snow. That was a big moment, a huge moment. Watching that movement, you know, these guys hanging out in the studio, building the studio, just mushing out every night of the week. You know, and then you had this X Factor Snow coming up from Melbourne, and you know, was it pineapples, healthy peas, healthy peas. I remember being in Brizzy watching that. That was fucking wild.
Because you ended up working with all those guys at one point, didn't you?
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. That was kind of, I guess, from meeting Wombat, looking up through the grime stuff to, the body bag movement. We went down for the Get Bodied Fest. I was there for the first ever show down in Sydney. And that was where everything really came together and everyone started to meet.
So what year would that have been? 2018, 17?
I think that was 2018. Yeah.
So that's when dudes like Chill, Husky, Alex Jones, yourself, Nerve,
Yeah,
all sort of started.
That was the week when I stayed at Chill's place, and it was like 5 a.m, and me, Husky, and Snow went to the service station and did servo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'd only just met the boys that week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and kind of pitched them this idea of, you got this fucking banging servo song, which was a sound that no one was really doing in Australia, I think. And I was like, what do you reckon about us repping the service station and walking through it? And chilling it drove us. I think OBL from NO.ONE was there as well. We met all the NO.ONE guys that trip on the Get Bodied show because they were on the lineup too. And we just put up at the servo and did it. But those artists, all of them, they have their own vibe and doing their own thing, like from, walking through the servo and, the boys grabbing all the bits and pieces and, the sneaky bits in the backpack and, then walking out and Snow throwing the $10 note on the ground and then chilling it, running to pick it up, and Husky's girlfriend's there cleaning the car. Like, none of that was planned. It was kind of just that same one-take culture, like, here's the spot, let's walk around it, and the boys just being themselves. And yeah, it came out to be a big thing.
Now, you talk about the Get Bodied Festival, that's kind of where it all started coming together. But that Sydney show, that wasn't the one where, because one of the Get Bodied festivals or shows had like the riot thing that happened.
So that was Brizzy, that was our hometown.
So that was a part of the same tour, but different city.
So the Sydney show, it was awesome, everyone linking up, but I think it was only 300 people in a pub. It was a small pub gig. I don't even know how 300 people fit in there. Could have been less. And then the Brizzy one was when all the boys came up and you had that whole new movement of artists coming up, and it was wild. They played at the Triffid. I think they did 500 tickets, and the capacity there's massive. It's an old air hangar. And that was massive as well because you had all the boys from, Melbourne, Sydney, I think Shadow from Perth, NO.ONE, all these guys coming up to the Brizzy gig. And then we had our crew, Syntax Junkies and Skrub. And so you just had this massive fucking lineup. And yeah, it was fucking wild. I remember I hadn't seen any shit like that, hey, because we were doing a lot of the media. And I remember watching, 201 was massive at the time. 201 was huge. And that was a massive movement on the internet. And then it come into life in Brisbane, kids just went wild. I saw shit in the crowd I've never seen at a hip hop gig before.
Can you tell us the kind of shit that you saw?
I literally saw cunts feeding each other Xanny bars and shit and stuff like it was fucked. Like, looking back at it, you're like, growing up a bit more now, it's like, was that culture necessarily, appropriate? But it was part of it, and I was there to be like documenting that but what the energy and what they brought on stage and the way they performed and that, that crew element, that new young crew wave movement, and they were all documenting it because those boys were all in a van kicking it together, coming up the East Coast, driving together, and just like the fuckery and all the, mucking around that you could see getting documented. And it kind of, I think, brought back that ground level of just being young with your crew and just riding it out.
Yeah, run amok.
Yeah, and I think, Chill was a big spearhead of that, his energy and what he represented, was trying to pull that all together and really get everyone to be pushing this movement, And because he was the older one of the group and, he'd been doing his thing on Hustle Hard for a while. And yeah, so it was cool to watch and be witness to it and then document a little bit of it too.
So then can you recall, because I've spoke to Skrub, I think last week or the week before, because he was there, but he can't actually remember exactly what happened. He just remembered that there was a ride out the front. But can you recall?
Yeah. So you just had your classic, like, two dudes, fans, just wanting to kick on at the end of the show. They shut down the show. I think midnight it was closing up, so like everyone out.
So did everyone get to perform, or some acts had their sets cut?
Some acts got their set cut, but I don't know if that was whether or not because we just went over time. Because you're talking about a bunch of young cunts that were just trying to run their own show on such an epic scale. And I think the thing that really stuffed up was that, you know, the Trifid just opened the floodgates. You know, they were just like, all right, show's over, everyone out. And you're talking about a dead-end street. And so everyone's flooded out. And then obviously some shit's kicked off between two people. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's fucking, you know, fuck that shit. That's Gronk behavior. But these two people kicked off, and the cops just came swinging in on this dead end. Cars pulled up, and you've got 500 people spilling out of a show, and the cop cars just come at the end of the road and block it off. So it's the only way out, and you got 500 kids who are just G'd the fuck up from like one of the most epic shows they've seen, and there's only one way out, and we're all just heading towards the cop cars. So they kind of asked for it a bit. It was a bit of a tease.
And then so then what's happened from there? So the cops have pretty much just blocked everyone into a dead end.
Yeah, and then they're coming down trying to, you know, aggressively control the chaos. And I think, you know, just psychology of people, you know, a few boys started kicking it off, and the cops had to pull back.
So what actually happened? Did they start like throwing bottles at the police, or?
I think some bottles were thrown. Just mainly people just getting G'd up and yelling at them. And just drunk young shit. And, I think at the point I remember at that point there was all this shit going on, and Nerves just walking around with a trolley full of merch, selling merch, and it was just chaotic. But honestly, it wasn't too bad. There were a few people, you know, in the fights and stuff, and a bunch of people getting arrested. That only amplifies and makes that energy even more aggressive. I think, you know, someone seeing their mates getting arrested, then they G up, or you know, whether they think he did anything wrong, and the cops just kind of choose their targets without actually having any reason to, and it just escalated from there, you know. Yeah,
right. And then so how did it all end up fizzling out?
I think though everyone, you know, who wanted to get out of the street could. But there was a bunch of fuckload more cops came, and I think that was kind of how they did it. Just more and more cops come, but it wasn't like 500 people lined up with rocks and bottles, and like it was nothing like that. Like if you wanted to get out of there, you could.
Yeah.
But I think them adding to the energy just made certain people more aggressive. It just got a bit wild, and then you know, you had the news come in and document it. So then and then I think that was a massive moment. Was, you know, I think you got that chilling at bar till we get on the Channel 9 news or whatever, and then fucking on Sunday night, like there's shots of the show on Channel 9 news. So they really helped the boys out with that one.
And then so was it after that event that Nerve and Chill did that collab, or was that before that?
Yeah, so we had a studio in Brisbane, and all the guys were hanging out there. At that point, it was just a shed studio. We had a bunch of the lads coming through and hanging out. Before all of that as well, I think you had a Wombat show, and that was where Chill had met a lot of the guys. The same thing. You just had this body movement, body bag movement, and they were all hanging out and coming up. Or it might have been just after when we did the Wombat show, actually. And that kind of solidified it a bit later, like 6 months later. Everyone was just linking up and chatting and doing their thing. But I think Toby and Nerve and Chill did their track at Body Bag Studios.
So you didn't film that one?
No, I wasn't around for that. Wombat was going over to Body Bag and to go hang out with those guys, and Nerve went along.
Yeah, okay.
And they made some tracks, and yeah.
Now, all this sort of stuff, because it sounds like there was just a lot going on at this point in time. And then so this is around 2018. That's the year that you officially launched No1Network as that brand?
Yeah, in May 2018. Yeah.
Okay, and so why did you pick that particular name, and what made you officially launch it as a brand?
So I think the whole concept with No1 was we were kind of people that no one cared about, you know, kind of in the shadows. No one gave a shit about hip-hop. No one gave a shit about graffiti culture. No one really cared about this whole underground street culture movement. And that was kind of the beauty of it. It had this network of people. I had this album that I was contributing photos to for a couple of years with this whole movement called The Network. And kind of all just linked up together. You know, we're the no ones, the nobodies. the network of No.ONEs.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So then this is 2018. And then in 2019, you did an interview with Chazza from the UK.
Don't think so. What I did interview with him maybe 2020, I think, in the studio at Green Slopes.
Okay, so that was 2020.
Yeah.
In that interview, you guys discussed like the whole thing about drill and then the violence, the impact that it has.
Yeah. So a big thing was doing the No.ONE.Network was kind of trying to focus on positivity and longevity, like focusing on the art. Before I met Toby and a lot of the things we saw around us, it was a lot of toxic sides of the culture. We also had a lot of the older guys who kind of bridged us into the scene, like really teach us a lot about that. A lot of when they were our age, might not have had similar outlooks, but now that they come through the scene, a lot of people, whether it's gone to jail, passed away, drug addiction, like all the toxic sides of hip hop culture. We were very lucky at a young age to have the older guys kind of, really back and see what we were doing. There was a massive focus with Nerve music as well, and kind of why I linked up with him. There's a lot of old crew and stuff that I might have hung out with back in the day, and this positive kind of focus on the culture and the longevity and the art, and still backing yourself and doing what you want to do and what you love, but not ruining yourself along the way.
So then I guess what is your take on drill and then the impact that it's having on the community?
I think it's important for people to be able to express their story, and to be honest, I think the audience is the problem with a lot of things. I think as creators, we're able to listen as an audience and take away from those things without it influencing us. But the audience is the one who can take the wrong influence from that music. Hip hop's always been about expressing yourself and telling your unique story. And a lot of those unique stories do come from the drill. And the people that you saw kind of contributing to that first were people who had been through things that none of us had been through, and experiences that none of us had, and expressing themselves was a good way for them to kind of maybe get away from that, or to be onto new paths in life, focusing on the art again. And honestly, I think it's the audience, and that's where you can get conflicted as a creator, because you think, is what I'm doing contributing and to this toxic culture? Does the audience really understand? Are they taking this a little bit too much and too much into their own lives, or idolizing it to a point that they want to follow those same pathways, when a lot of these people who are in these pathways and experiences didn't choose that? They didn't listen to some gangster music and then decide they want to be a gangster. They didn't listen to these things, and I think that's the thing with the drill movement and any movement and any side of that kind of sex, drugs, and violence, is a lot of people, certain personalities can gravitate to wanting to chase that lifestyle, when a lot of people didn't choose to be. And so I understand it, and I can see what it's doing for people, but I think the audience really need to think sometimes, and I think that also goes back to our responsibility as creators, though, to remind the audience. And a lot of the artists I was working with who, were representing different sides of the culture that people like Nerve weren't, did emphasize that a lot, and I had lots of conversations with, and that's why, looking back at the 201 movement and things like that as well, a lot of that was, drug abuse and a certain lifestyle. But I remember, chats with Husky, and Husky being like, "Don't be like me." That was a big part of his brand. But again, it comes down to the audience, how they interpret it, and how they go along with it, whether they can listen to the story or whether they can, idolize it and then try to be that.
Try to emulate
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't what makes it big in the first place. There's that blows up because it is a unique perspective that none of us have heard, or something where we go, holy shit, like I've never been through any of that,
Yeah, no doubt, man.
I think people need to acknowledge what they've been through and rep that. And we've never, ever tried to rep something that we've never done. And I think that's what's great about a lot of the Nerve movement and what we've been doing. It's about the art, because we're not out there slinging packs and rapping about it. You know, we're not there with 100 bitches at our house and rapping about it. You know, like girls, women, I should say. You know what I mean? So yeah, we're not trying to ever say something that we're not doing, and I think that's what got us a lot of respect from the older heads who have seen that culture and how much people try to copy and emulate things that they don't do.
Mm.
You know, it's about the art.
Now, also looking at 2019, you had a hand in filming Curse's Dead Set 9?
Yeah, that was epic, yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, you know, when did you first catch on to Cursor on your radar, and then how did that Dead Set 9 thing come together?
River City. I grew up with him. We used to run around young delinquent shit before I met any of the hip hop boys. We used to do a lot of dumb shit, and I think we used to, you know, go onto the rooftops and do a lot of that stuff a lot before Brisbane. And he was kind of similar, his connections to graffiti culture and working at the paint store. So we go back longer than a lot of the people that you see me work with. Julian, yeah, River City. And he created a pretty strong relationship with Cursor when he was touring. And that grew over years, and it got to a point where I think him and Cursor were a pretty good relationship. And he's pretty much done a lot of his videos. And when he comes up to Brisbane, helps him out a lot, and they hang out. And yeah, I think Julian River wanted to take it to the next level, and you know, not be doing it all by himself. And it kind of got me on board. I had a stabilizer. He didn't have a stabilizer, so yeah, he just hit me up one day and was like, "Do you want to come to the Versace Hotel to film a Cursor clip with me?" And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding? Of course." And yeah, that was a big experience. Like anything, I guess you have an idea of what someone's going to be like, and it was very grounding and humbling. You know, at one point, him and River went out, and I'm just sitting in Cursor's apartment, the Versace Hotel, by myself, just watching telly, and I was like, yeah, how many cunts would dream to be in that position?
So this was the first time that you met Cursor?
First time I met Cursor, yeah, and I think, you know, that's kind of comes down to just like, you know, being humble, being yourself, and that also that reference, you know, if Julian says, you know, River says I'm all right, then, you know, yeah, it was a unique experience. Yeah, I got to stay top level Versace apartment. I even got to check out. Scott had a flight in the morning, and then River needed to go drop him off. So yeah, checked out of Cursor's Versace Hotel, chilled out in the jacuzzi for a bit before I left.
Now, you talk about, I guess, you know, when you meet someone for the first time versus the perception. I guess what was, you know, your perception of Cursor versus meeting him for the first time?
I think like the more you get into this culture, the more you realize it never is exactly that. And pretty much everyone who is at a certain level of the creative field are the most open-minded, grounded, real people, you know. But obviously growing up watching, you know, the Southwest Sydney movement and knowing what he's like in terms of being pretty closed off from the social media world, I thought maybe he'd be like, you know, a little bit reserved and be like, who's this guy? But he was awesome, man. Great host. And, you know, it made me feel comfortable. Got us fucking dinner, you know, hooked us up. And yeah, it was just like kicking back vibes. It was real cool.
Yeah, word.
Yeah, I think the end of the night was just sitting at the top having a beer, having a chat. And yeah, I think the more you do this, the more you realize everyone is the same. We're all just kind of people just trying to
do their thing.
Yeah, no one's a god, you know. We're all like just chilling and being safe, kicking back, having a beer maybe, or whatever your thing is, whatever your vice is. And yeah, no one really wants to be more than that. I think sometimes it's just very grounding.
Yeah, no, shout out to the Curse, man.
Yeah, straight up.
Last album's incredible career, incredible what he's done. And
I think it's a big thing, and no matter like what you're into as well, the more you get into creating and the more you get into the field, you can really start to understand what he did, whether or not you identified with his music. The more you do this, you can really see how much of a genius he was and the way he did it. And I think, you know, on face value, and that happens a lot with hip hop culture and, you know, underground culture in general, is people judge it by the face value, and it can be very quick to stereotype. But man was a fucking genius. And the way he did it was an absolute weapon. You know, you got to give him credit for that, whether or not you're into his music.
All through the internet, man. He pretty much was pretty much the first to use the internet on that scale, like to get those kind of results with no radio play.
I think wasn't he the most listened to rapper on YouTube in Australia?
I remember seeing a post of him posting a
2009. I think he was on that.
Yeah, man. Well, shout outs to him. You know, hopefully post music, I'm sure he's got business plans.
Yeah,
to do some epic shit.
But he's still linking up and still changing it up. You know, he's been working with more busy creatives recently, like the Moon Boy creatives and that new clip they did, and that's a whole big movement from the classic style of videos that we're used to. It's all evolving and it's on some LA shit now.
We briefly talked about how you went to Melbourne for those 50-50 grime events, and talking about Wombat and the level that he's on with that grime shit. He had a battle, like a grime clash with Mr. Righty. I think that was 2019, and I think you filmed.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, what was your take on that particular event? Because a lot of people were quite disappointed, not with Wombat's performance, but with Mr. Righty's performance.
I think when you're talking about such a culture that was so new and growing, it would have been cool when the rest of the world and things are getting to we're starting to get to an international level. The world, like everyone was starting to watch Australia a bit more. That maybe we could have had a bigger impact with that. Grime Clash has been around for years and such a pioneering, pivotal part of the culture in the UK. And I think a lot of people were excited to see the potential in it. And for it to just be the first off wasn't, the best. It would have been awesome to have something really top tier, high level, because people around the world would have watched that, and for that to represent where our culture's at for potentially the biggest clash and the way it was hyped up, and two MCs that are meant to be renowned for being some of the best MCs in the country, for that level of standard to come from the first clash was just a bit disappointing. I feel like if we had a lot more going on and a lot more other clashes and things to follow it up, then it would be okay. But it was the first one, and it's still the only one.
Has there been no talks of another one?
I think you've had the drill scene, that drill movement come in pretty hard, and I think a lot of kids were getting excited and inspired by this UK movement, and there was potential there for grime to kind of rise. From from the 6 or 8 MCs we had on the first ever fully gas cypher to being 18, and Grumpy's packing out, and that was one of the last shows. Just was going out of control. I think there was so much potential for that, but the drill movement really came through, and now kids aren't probably growing up the same way listening to that grime culture, which is pretty dominant. Back when we were listening, like UK music was grime was the heavy thing. A little bit of drill even in the UK back then was, but now it's a massive force all around the world. Drill music. I think the versatility and the sound is a little bit more approachable on a universal scale than a lot of the grime culture, which is also based off live. Grime culture was based off DJs and MCs in a bar just going at it, and the live element was so important. And that's probably also like part that was disappointing about the clash, is that that live element needed to be smooth and clean, and that's where an MC really shows where they're different from being a studio MC to an actual MC. And that's the MC DJ element's the most important part of grime culture.
Well, hopefully we get to see another one.
Yeah.
Surely we'll get to see another one. Wombat, if you're listening.
I don't think everyone who's came from that movement has stopped. And I think sometimes you need a bit of time to switch off before you switch on again. And like anything, the more everything gets bigger and every genre gets bigger, it all rises. Even if grime is still smaller than drill, it's still going to grow. The rest, everything grows. Like people, say boom bap was dead, but boom bap is, just as liable, if not getting, more notice now. People are looking back, at the things that 10 years ago people might not have noticed, So it's,
Nerb's got a little hand to play in that. He makes the boom bap sound like he's still got it in his music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the youngins, they might not even know that that's his particular sound, but he manages to get them to gravitate towards it.
I think there was a massive focus and a thing that really gravitated towards, you know, Nerve and the Syntax and that team was the approach that they had, being old school and focusing on the lyrics and what you're saying, but then also being mathematical. And that is like an important part still in the music now. It's not just about the sound, it's about what you're saying and how you're doing it, and the brains behind it, and the little tricks and the wordplay. You know, that's such an important part of hip hop and boom bap and the culture that kind of all was born from. You know, it was being smart with it, not just sounding cool.
You got to be clever with your raps.
Yeah, I mean, he conveniently sounds pretty cool too. So.
The lesson. 927. Oh yeah.